All right, so let's dive into this idea of conquering hesitation, like
Mhm.
actually conquering it. You know that feeling when you're about to go for something you really want?
Like speak up at a meeting or finally start that project.
Exactly. And that wave of self-doubt just hits you. What if there was a way to just break through that in like 5 seconds?
It sounds almost too good to be true, right?
Right, like some sort of magic trick.
Well, that's the premise of Mel Robbins' book, The 5-Second Rule. But what's really interesting is that she doesn't just present it as like, a motivational trick. She connects it to actual neuroscience.
Okay, so I know a lot of our listeners are probably already familiar with the whole countdown thing. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you take action. But for this deep dive, let's go deeper. What's actually happening in our brains when we do this? Is it really like some kind of mental reset button?
So think about what usually happens when we hesitate. We start overthinking, right? We picture all the ways things could go wrong,
Oh, yeah, totally.
and that triggers our fear response. Robbins argues that this countdown interrupts that overthinking loop.
So it's like you're cutting it off at the source.
Exactly. And by engaging in the countdown, you're shifting your focus to a very specific task.
Hmm.
The counting itself, this activates the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that's responsible for, making decisions and taking action.
So it's not just about like willpower or psyching yourself up. There's an actual neurological shift.
Right. It's like you're giving your brain a clear instruction to override those automatic fear signals and just take control.
So I bet some people are hearing this and thinking, wait a minute, isn't that just like making me impulsive?
Yeah, I can see that.
What about situations where you really need to think things through?
Absolutely. There's a balance to be struck. The 5-second rule isn't about making, rash decisions. It's about recognizing that hesitation often comes from fear, not logic.
Fear, not logic. That's a good distinction.
And sometimes the best way to overcome that fear is to just act.
Okay, so let's talk about why we hesitate in the first place. I mean, the book digs into the psychology of procrastination, which I think is something we can all relate to.
Well, for sure.
Like, why is it so hard to act even when we know what's good for us?
We have to remember our brains are wired to seek comfort and avoid discomfort.
Comfort over everything.
Exactly. Procrastination at its core is about avoiding the potential discomfort of the task itself, the potential for, failure, the potential for judgment.
So it's like our brains are trying to protect us in a way, but in doing so, it actually keeps us stuck.
Exactly. Avoiding discomfort doesn't actually make it go away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It often just amplifies it.
Yeah, you end up feeling more stressed, more anxious,
Exactly.
more overwhelmed.
Which ironically makes you even less likely to take action.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Becomes a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
And that's where the 5-second rule comes in. It provides a way to break that cycle by, short-circuiting the fear response and getting us into action.
Okay, I'm curious about this whole idea of courage because Robbins talks a lot about courage in the book. How does the 5-second rule relate to developing courage? Is it about becoming fearless? That's where things get really interesting. One of the most powerful insights from the book is that courage isn't the absence of fear.
Oh, interesting.
It's acting in spite of it. Yeah, it's not about waiting till you feel brave or confident.
Just do it, scared or not.
Exactly. And the more we do that, the more we build up our courage muscle. Like think about learning to ride a bike.
Okay.
You don't wait till you're confident to, hop on and start pedaling.
True.
You just get on, you fall off, you get back on, and eventually you learn.
So it's the action itself that builds the confidence,
Yeah.
not the other way around.
Right. It applies to so many things. We wait to feel confident before we speak up, before we pursue a goal, before we just put ourselves out there.
What if we just went for it?
Exactly. What if we acted first and let the confidence catch up?
I can see how this all ties back to the 5-second rule. It's like that countdown gives you this window to act before all the doubts and fears can creep in.
Right. It's about interrupting that hesitation pattern and replacing it with a pattern of action.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be these big, huge, life-altering actions.
Yeah.
It can be small, everyday acts of courage.
So like what would be an example of a small act of courage using the 5-second rule?
Okay, so let's say you're dreading making a phone call.
Ugh, the worst.
Maybe it's to schedule that doctor's appointment you've been putting off, or to have a difficult conversation with a coworker.
Oh, yeah,
You feel that resistance, that urge to just avoid it.
totally.
But instead of letting that feeling take over, you count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you pick up the phone.
Okay, so that's a small win. But how does that build momentum toward bigger things?
Because each time you use the 5-second rule, you're proving to yourself that you can take action, that you can push past those limits. It's like you're making a deposit into your courage bank.
I love that. Your courage bank.
And as those deposits add up, your belief in yourself grows.
Okay, but let's be real. Not every attempt is going to be a success. How does Robbins deal with setbacks and failures?
That's another thing I love about her perspective. She doesn't see failure as the end of the world.
Okay.
She actually encourages you to embrace so-called failures as opportunities to learn and grow.
So it's not about beating yourself up when things don't go as planned.
No, it's about recognizing that setbacks are going to happen, but they don't have to derail you.
So even if you totally fall off the wagon, you can use the countdown to get back up and keep moving.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about building resilience
Yeah.
and recognizing that progress isn't always linear.
Yeah, it's not always a straight line.
There are going to be bumps in the road, but it's the overall direction you're moving in that matters.
This is making me think about different personality types. Like, what about people who struggle with anxiety or overthinking? Could this actually make them feel more pressure?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's something Robbins addresses in the book. She emphasizes that the 5-second rule is a tool.
Okay.
And like any tool, it can be used in different ways. For someone who tends to overthink, it can be really helpful in breaking free from analysis paralysis.
Getting unstuck.
But it's also important to be mindful of your own needs and tendencies.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Right. It's about finding what works for you and using the rule in a way that feels supportive, not stressful.
So maybe you combine it with other things like mindfulness or therapy.
Exactly.
Okay, this is all great. We've talked about courage, setbacks, different personalities, but there's another big idea in the book I want to get to. Momentum. Robbins doesn't just present the 5-second rule as a way to take individual actions.
Right.
She talks about how it can create this ripple effect in our lives.
Yeah, like a snowball effect.
So how does that work? How does momentum actually work with the 5-second rule?
Well, it's like this. Each time you use the rule, you're not just accomplishing like that one task.
Yeah.
You're actually building this pattern of behavior.
So it's bigger than just like checking something off your to-do list.
Exactly. It's about creating this positive feedback loop where action leads to confidence. Confidence leads to more action. And suddenly you're like on a roll.
Okay, I get that. But how does that translate to real life changes? Like, give me an example.
Okay, let's say you're trying to build a consistent workout habit. You know, you set your alarm for 6 a.m.,
Oh, yeah.
but when it goes off, that warm bed is calling your name.
I've been there.
But instead of hitting the snooze button, you use the 5-second rule. You count down from 5 and you force yourself out of bed.
It's not easy.
No, it's not. But you've overcome that initial inertia.
And that's when the momentum kicks in.
That's it. That one small victory sets the tone for the rest of your day. So you're more likely to eat a healthy breakfast. You tackle your work with more focus. Maybe you even make healthier choices throughout the day.
Because you've already proven to yourself that you can take action.
Exactly.
Even when it's tough.
And that sense of accomplishment, I feel like it doesn't just stay in that one area of your life.
Yeah.
It spills over into other
You
things.
got it. It's like this domino effect.
Yeah.
You start to see yourself as someone who takes action, someone who follows through. And that belief in yourself just fuels further action.
So it keeps building.
It creates this upward spiral of positive change. Okay, but what about those times when we stumble? You know, we've all had those days where the motivation just disappears.
Oh, yeah.
Or we slip back into old habits.
Well, that's where the 5-second rule becomes even more important.
Yeah.
It's not about being perfect.
Right.
It's about having a tool to get back on track when you inevitably fall off course.
Like a reset button for your habits.
Yeah, kind of. It lets you interrupt those negative patterns and make a conscious choice to realign with your goals.
So this has been a really interesting deep dive into the 5-second rule. We've explored the science behind it, the psychology, even some real-world applications.
And it's amazing how such a simple technique can have such a huge impact on your life.
Mel Robbins' book is a great reminder that change doesn't have to be this big, scary thing. It can start with one small 5-second decision.
One small step.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want you to think about this. What one thing are you going to count down to do? What's one small step you can take right now to break free from hesitation and move towards the life you want?
Remember, 5 seconds is all it takes. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Go.